What's going on, YouTube? This video is being made for one of my viewers who had asked a question about a 2006 Honda Accord. I don't know if he has the 2.4 or the 3.0 or if it's a hybrid or not a hybrid. Really doesn't matter. So 8 Power 0, this video is for you. From what I can see, the wiper washer system on these are pretty much same for whatever engine or platform you have. So I just picked the 2.4 base model, okay? Now the complaint on this, from what I understand, is every time he turns his ignition switch to on, or on, or starts the vehicle, the wipers run, okay? And doesn't matter what position he has the switch in, they just continuously run. So I told him I'd make him a video explaining how I would go about diagnosing this complaint if it came into the shop. I am by no means an expert on Honda, and I can't even. It's going to be difficult. Well, not difficult, but it's going to be a little bit more challenging to diagnose this circuit because there's a lot going on with the wiper system in these without trouble codes, okay? Nevertheless, one of the first things I would do if this came into the shop with that complaint is I would first do a DTC scan, of course, and see if I have any trouble codes. Now, I'm in the service manual, and I guess, what are you going to bill for time on this? You're probably going to start with an hour, most likely. So in that initial hour, the first thing I would do is I'd get myself familiar with the system. I could do that one of several ways. Usually, what I do is I go right to a wiring diagram. So I would just come in here, on Mitchell, they give you a hyperlink right here, wiring diagrams, okay? Now, this video might get a little lengthy, and that's because I want to make sure I cover everything for him, and because there's more to this than what meets the eye. So here's our wiper washer diagram, and you're going to see here it says accept hybrid, so I'm going to be using that throughout the duration of this. Now, I looked at the hybrid circuit. It looked very similar to this, but nevertheless, this would be one of the first things I would do. Okay, so since we know that the motor is obviously operating all the time when we turn the key on, I'm going to go right to the motor on the wiring diagram first and see how it gets its powers and its grounds, okay? Or its power and ground, if you will. And forgive me, my voice is kind of worn out, guys. So, all right, so here is our windshield wiper motor under the left side of our cowl cover, okay? Now, you can see here that the motor itself is grounded. And then there's also another ground here. Looks like G302, okay? And that is behind the left side of our front bumper. Now, the fact that the motor is running tells me that I'm not worried about grounds. I'm not worried about power. So there's no sense in going to the fuse, no sense in checking the ground. However, it's running all the time. So is it an input problem? Or is it a relay problem or something along those lines, okay? And that's where my head would be going right now. But getting back to the basics, where is it getting its power feed from? So let's find out that first. We know where it's getting its ground from, okay? We would assume it's here, but if you look, it says park and run. Now what that is that's a switch internal to the motor. So when the motor's commanded on, this switch, goes, when the wipers move, it's going to go to run, and then when they come back to park, it's going to switch back to park. So this is a constant movement. Don't let that confuse you. So let's look at the motor. We got low and high. The high is the blue, the low is the yellow. This is our motor assembly. And if we come up here, you can see we have a high relay and we have an intermittent washer intermittent relay, okay? Or wiper, rather. Wiper high, wiper intermittent. Okay. This green wire here, coming off the side here, is our power feed to our motor, okay? So let's follow that up. And I've already looked this over extensively, guys, just so I was prepared for this video. But if we look here, we have fuse 11. It's a 30 amp fuse, okay? That is a hot and on or start fuse. And that is in our under dash fuse relay box in our left kick panel, okay? So that is our power feed. Our power feed that's obviously gonna be hot when we turn the key on, okay, matching his complaint. So in order for this motor to run, there has to be a path to ground. Now, don't get confused by this leg of the circuit, because that is not the ground for the motor. The ground for the motor is this way, guys, this way. So depending on, it really doesn't matter. The fact that it's running all the time when he turns the key on tells me that somehow it's finding a path to ground. Now let's look at these two relays here. These relays are housed inside of a relay control module. And excuse me if I do that. This is just part of working with touchscreens. This relay control module, you can see we have a dotted line around this. It means it's a partial view of our underhood fuse relay box. Okay, and that's on the left rear corner of the engine compartment, forward of the strut. Okay, now that power, that 12-volt feed coming from the green from the fuse, is going to go through our motor windings, and our yellow and our blue are going to be hot feeds at all times. Okay, now these relays are drawn in the open state, or the not energized state. So what that means is, in order for these relays to, basically in order for the wiper motor to move, right, there needs to be a path to ground. So let's look at it in the open position as is, as if we have our switch off, okay? Obviously, when we turn our ignition on, we're going to get our 12-volt feed, and it's going to come out on this yellow, and it's going to come up through the relay here. It's going to come over, and it's going to come over to the intermittent wiper relay down, and you're going to see this little dot, this little splice going up to the control block. I'll explain that in a minute. The 12-volt feed is going to come down back to the park switch, or the park run switch within the motor, and it's just going to find itself again here. Basically, we have two 12-volt. The 12 volts is just going to remain constant. It has nowhere to go. It can't drop to ground, okay? So let's look at this. If I turn my switch, we'll go to the switch in a minute here, but if I turn my switch on, okay, whatever setting, let's say we turn it all the way to high, and we want high relay. What's going to happen is the control block inside this fuse relay block, underhood fuse box, if you look here, this is a control side of the intermittent relay, and this is control side of the high relay, okay? Look at where those, and it shares, they all share what? That's our washer relay. That's our intermittent wiper relay. That's our windshield wiper relay, okay? And you can see they all share what? A ground, which tells me that this is the ground side of all the controls for these relays. And then the opposite side goes to our control block. Okay, you see that? So the control block is what? Switching power. It's a power side switched relay to energize them. Okay, so if I want high speed, I'm going to have 12 volts coming in through our blue here. The control block within the relay box, underhood relay, fuse relay box, is going to switch power to our high relay, closing it, closing the switch, which is going to allow the 12 volts to go this way. And again, it's got to find its path to ground. it can't go back, okay, because it wouldn't have a path to ground. So what it's going to do is it's also going to energize the intermittent wiper relay, okay? So it's going to, for high speed, it's going to energize both these relays. See that? And it's going to close both of them. And then we're going to have a path this way down to ground, okay? Now, this little splice there that goes up to the control block is basically, this control block is monitoring this leg right here, okay? And when this is energized, remember, this green wire is a constant 12 volts when the key is on or when it's running. So if this motor is moving, meaning this switch is going from run to park, that means this is essentially an on-off 12 volts at all times, okay? And these relays are going to be closed, so this is just monitoring that, okay? And this is how it knows when the wipers are back down in the park position, okay? It's monitoring this 12 volt feed, and it knows when the wipers are up, and it knows when they're down, okay? 12 volts when it's going to 12 volts when they're parked. And if you look, it goes to ground, right? No voltage. Voltage, no voltage. Voltage, no voltage. It's that simple. Just an input. So, let me take a minute here and gather my thoughts, but that is how the high speed works, okay? Okay, guys, so let's talk about the intermittent speed relay. So, if the intermittent speed, the switch input is in the intermittent position, not the high, the intermittent, which would be like all your different varying speeds all the way up to the high position, right? The high relay is not going to be energized. And if you see here, it says low speed, right? Because we know that when we're in intermittent mode, it's a low speed, delay, right? This control block can control this relay on and off at will because it has the input. And I'm going to show you the input side of this system here in a minute. But same thing. We have that constant 12 volt feed coming in our green, going through the motor windings, coming out on the low side, coming up the yellow. All right, this relay is already, its natural state is in the intermittent mode, okay? So it's naturally going to take this 12 volts, it's going to send it over, and it's just going to close the relay, giving it that path to ground, and then release the relay, okay? Again, it can monitor that and monitor this park and run the same way, okay? It can monitor the park and run the same way in the motor, the actual wiper motor, in the intermittent mode as well, okay? So it knows. All it's doing is energizing, closing the switch, opening the switch, closing it, opening, on, off. That's all it's going to do, okay? So that means that our yellow in the intermittent mode is going to be 12 volts, then 0 volts. 12 volts, then 0 volts. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Because it's going to drop, and then it's going to come high again. It's going to drop, it's going to come high again. So the blue, since it's in high, okay, both the high speed is just going to remain, it's just going to energize both the relays on, off, okay? And it's monitoring the position of the wipers based on the switch inside the wiper motor. I hope that makes sense. Okay, that's the output side of this motor. Now again, the complaint is that in the switch in the off position, key on or running, the wipers are running non-stop. So, do we have an output problem? Do we have a relay problem? Do we have a park run switch problem? Could we have a wire issue? We could have a lot of possibilities here. Let's look at the input side from the switch assembly. Now, this wiper washer switch you can see that also has a dotted line. And inside of it, it has what's called a combination switch control unit. Okay? There is a lot going on with this switch assembly. Okay? And it's on multiple wiring diagrams. In fact, I will show you all the wiring diagrams it's on. It's on, I want to say 4 different wiring diagrams in Protoman here. Okay? Now, let's look at this. So, first thing we want to do is we want to look at the switch. And that's what I always do anyways. And you can see off position, okay? Off position, off position. So this is drawn in the off position. And here we have intermittent dwell time controller, okay? I'm not sure exactly how this works, but obviously, these are, this combination switch control unit is switching, this is power. This has got to be power coming out of here because we have a ground here, okay? So, it's monitoring the ground. It's it knows all these switch positions. So if I'm in the wash, if I hit my washer switch, it's going to see, it's going to see this 12 volts that it's sending down to the wash leg here. It's going to see it pull it to ground, and that's how it knows. That's how it knows to spray, okay? That's how it knows to control, the relay inside of this control block, okay? It knows how to, send that signal to it. Now, how is it doing that? That's what we have to ask ourselves. Okay, I'm going to show you. I'll explain that here in a minute. All right. So, all these are switch inputs. Okay. So if one of these switches is shorted, let's say in the intermittent position, okay. If I switch you see how the dotted line is between the two switches? So if I switch it to intermittent, let's say intermittently, I want the wipers to go on, not low, not high. You're going to see it's going to drop. This one's going to drop to 0. This one's going to be, these are going to remain high. These two legs here, they're going to remain at 12. Okay, see that? So the computer knows, or this combination switch control unit knows that you want intermittent wiper blade operation, okay? And it's probably using this intermittent dwell time controller, I'd imagine, which is like a variable resistor, so to speak, or drawn as such, to do so, okay? Really doesn't matter. Same thing for low. If you look at low, if I switch this, it's going to pull that one low, and it's going to pull this one low. Now it knows it wants low speed, okay? If you want high speed, this one stays high. See that? Switch is in the high. This one pulls low. Tracking? Now, if you notice, there is a wire splice here, and this goes down on this green white to this control block. What's that all about? What is that all about? Well, that green white is an input to the control block, okay? For what? What input is that for? Let's look at that. So if I'm switched to high, there's always a 12 volt feed to the control block. Now if I switch it to high, it's going to pull that 12 down, and this should go to 0 on this green white, I would assume, because say the combination switch control unit, okay, is sending 12 down here to high and low, and then it's also sending it down, this green white, down to our relay control module, okay? If I switch my switch to high, isn't it going to pull that 12 volts down to ground right here? Right there? To ground, what is that, G501? It is. So not only does the combination switch control unit know that it's being pulled low there and you want high speed, But this control block also knows that, and it's smart. And what it's going to do is it knows that you want high speed. Okay? Tracking? Hopefully you are. Now, there's more to this switch assembly, and I'll show you that here in a minute. But actually, let me explain all of them. So we've got this white-red coming to our wipe. This is our wiper switch, okay? Our wiper switch. We got this white-red, and if we look, it goes through a junction block, and it's got a hot at all times fuse 7, 10 amp under dash fuse relay box kick panel, okay? That's a hot at all times fuse. That's its power feed, okay? Then we've got this light green here. I'm going to get to that here in a minute. Let's look at this yellow. Again, hot and run or start. That's an ignition. That's an ignition fused 7.5 amp ignition. So it's telling you the ignition's on, okay? And an input, ignition feed input. All-time power, ignition power. Okay, so now we know what to expect to see at the switch assembly as far as that's concerned. Again, I'll get back to that green-white, or that light green wire here in a minute. We've already discussed the green-white, how that operates. And obviously we know black is ground, okay? Now there are more pins to this switch assembly, okay? And I'm going to show you all of them here in a minute. Right now we're just getting familiar with the system. Now this light green here, if you notice, it's tied into this blue. And this blue comes down, also comes into our relay control module or our control block. Interesting. And that is coming from this MCU. Now I don't know what MCU is, but it's some kind of control unit internal to what? That underhood fuse relay box, okay? Which gets its power from this fuse, that hot at all times, and it also gets its ignition switched power, okay? So everyone knows when the ignition is turned on as far as these little control units inside these switch assemblies and these fuse boxes, and they also get their full-time power, okay? What this light green and blue wire is that's our CAN B, okay? That is a CAN bus, so to speak, but they call it a CAN or a B CAN, okay? So how do I know that? I'm going to show you. All right, now that we're familiar with the system, how do we test it? Well, that's a good question. If it was me, I would want to see the input side first. So what I would do is, since I know that this, well, I don't know that, I guess, this could be confusing if you don't know, but since I don't know what these wires do yet, okay, I guess one of the first things I want to do is, since I know what's going on here, okay, this is a complete drawing of the motor, I would probably want to go, first things first is I would want to go in to my MCU or my, however they label that, if it's in the if they label it under body control module, I have no idea without hooking up to the car, but there's going to be some kind of input PID that I could look at on the scan tool that should tell me, show me what switch position I'm in, possibly what state these relays are in, okay? But all that aside, I'm not going to drag it into the weeds too much. Let me show you what I would do here, okay? All right, so since we know that this green wire is hot only when the key is on or with the engine running, we could, and we know it's good because obviously the wipers are running, right? What I'd want to do is I'd be concerned with a short to ground somewhere or a relay that's stuck on for whatever reason, okay? Our switch input could be shorted as well. So don't get me wrong. We could go to the switch assembly or we could go to the motor. So we're 25 minutes in and I still haven't tested anything. I'm just getting direction. So one of the first things I do when I'm in the shop, now we're 25 minutes in because I'm yapping, okay? Obviously it would go quicker in real life. So let me show you something. So what I would do first is I would go to my estimate guide, since I only have an hour to get direction and determine how much time it's going to take me to test this. And what I would do is I'd go to accessory control systems. Or I'm sorry, I'd scroll down here. Yeah. I'd go into accessories and equipment. I'd scroll down to wiper washer systems. And I could decide, do I want to go to the switch or do I want to go to the pump? Okay. Or not the pump, rather, but the wiper motor. Well, let's look at removal times. So to do a wiper motor on this vehicle is 0.8 hours, okay? To do the switch is 0.7, okay? What if I go, now, again, we've only sold an hour. Now, to get to these, just to get to them, we're looking at about that amount of time, okay? Maybe a little more, almost like an hour and a half. So me personally, I would immediately go to my service writer and say, yeah, you need to sell an hour and a half of testing time, because I'm probably going to have to go to the switch. I might not, okay? I might just be able to go to the motor and be done right there. But given after just looking at the system, I can tell you that I want an hour and a half, okay? That extra half hour is going to cover the time it's going to take me to research the system, get my test equipment ready, tear stuff apart, do whatever, okay? So an hour and a half, at least, is more than fair. Now, if we have to replace one of the components, we're already going to have things apart, so we're not going to bill all that much more time, or, it's really just going to be a matter of parts, okay? So keep that in mind. All right. Getting back to the system. All right. Now, let's say we're going to go to the wiper motor, okay? And that's, where I'd probably go. But one of the first things I do is I go into the service manual before I recommend, when I'm deciding what I want to do as far as where I want to go test. I would come in here and I would go to accessories and equipment, and I'd go to wiper washer system, accept hybrid. And in here, they actually give you testing, okay? Wiper motor test, okay? You could follow this and it should lead you in the right direction. Now, I've already read through that. It's a lot of disconnecting here, ohming the wiring. If this is true, that is true. Scratch all that. I'm not doing that. You could certainly read through that if you were confused. But what I'm concerned about is wiper motor replacement, because I want to know what I have to take apart. I got to remove the hood seals and cowl covers, disconnect these connectors and the wiper motor. Okay. So basically, I got to take the cowl apart, and that's what it's going to involve. All right. Now, to each their own. Taking the wiper blades off, taking this cowl apart, you got snaps involved. Do you want to go there? You could. Me personally, I probably would go here because, and this comes down to, personal preference. Because if we go back to our wiring diagram, all right, we already know everything that's going on. Again, we've sold that hour and a half. So the nice thing about going right to the motor is it's going to tell us a lot. It's going to tell us if we need to go on the input side of house, or if we in fact have a bad motor, okay? Because couldn't we have a shorted park run switch. Think about this. If this switch is stuck in the run position, think about this. If this switch were stuck in the run position and it's not actually showing a park position, like say it never switches back to park, okay? Even though the wipers came down. Just think about that. And we have the key on. And in theory, switch is off, right? That power is going to come down. It's going to come up through the yellow. It's going to go through our high relay. It's going to come through our intermediate relay. It's going to come down. What normally would not be a ground would be a ground. Do you see it? And it would actually cause our wipers to run. So, or our motor to run. Okay, so think about that. So how do we test for that? Well, it's real simple. Turn your key off. Take a test light. Okay? Hook it to battery positive. And touch the white wire. Back probe it. Should it be lit? If you're hooked to B positive, key off. Should that test light be lit? No, it should not. If I turn the key on, should it be lit? No, it should not, because you're hooked to B positive. So even with 12 volts coming here from the green wire, that light should remain out. If you have a lit test light on that white, you have a problem with this switch. Now you could, I'm not saying it's not possible. This monitoring portion from the control block could be a partial, a really high resistance ground. And you might have a dimly lit test light there with the key on or whatever. But you shouldn't have a bright test light, a really good ground. If you have a really good ground, guys, and if you're really concerned about it, disconnect it. Just disconnect it and touch the pin on the motor itself. If you got a lit test light there, disconnect it. You got a bad park run switch internal to the motor assembly, okay? You're done. All right. The other test we can do with the test light, when we're in here, we can turn our key off, disconnect it. Okay? Disconnected. We're not worried about the ground. We know it's good, right? Now let's think about this. Say we had a relay that's stuck. Okay? Keys off. We're disconnected from the motor. Couldn't I use an ohm meter here? Couldn't I take one end of my multimeter on the yellow to the white? And shouldn't I have continuity in the rest state? Again, we're disconnected from the motor. I should have continuity, right? If I don't have continuity there, wouldn't that tell me one of these relays is switched, is stuck? Okay, we could do that. And we could also do from white to blue. We shouldn't have continuity from white to blue, disconnected, key off, right? All right, so that's another way we could test it. Plugged in, okay? Plugged in, and the reason I say unplugged is because if you're plugged in, you're going to find continuity through the motor, so you got to keep that in mind. Plug it in. Turn the key to on, your wipers are going to be on constant, right? Take the multimeter, still hooked to, one end hooked to battery negative, and check. Shouldn't you have 12 volts on your blue? Yes, you should, right? Because it's not going to drop to ground. Shouldn't you have 12 volts on your yellow? Yes, you should, because it shouldn't be dropping to ground. But it's going to be, right? You should have 12 volts here. You should have 12 volts here. Essentially, oh my goodness, what did I do? Let me get back in here. Hold on, sorry. Essentially, you should have 12 volts on your blue, 12 volts on your yellow, 12 volts on your white at all times. Key on, engine off. Key on, engine run. You're not commanding those wipers on, okay? with the switch. There's no switch input. It's in the off position. So those relays should not be energized, which means there's no path to ground for this motor. It means all of these are going to have 12 volts except for our ground. The only one that our test light should light on is our ground at the motor. Okay? So that's another way we could test. Now, if we see anything, if we see a test light that is not lit, or I'm sorry, we're hooked to B positive with our test light. If we see a test light that is lit on any of these wires, that tells us direction. Because what if it's lit on our blue? Okay, that tells us that it's finding a path to ground. Okay, it tells us that our relays are energized. And if we have a lit test light on our blue, if we have a lit test light, because we're hooked to B positive. So or what was I saying? A multimeter? Yeah. Take your test light. You could do the same thing with a test light. I hope I'm not confusing anyone. You probably are confused already. It is what it is. So if you take a test light and you get your key on, right? You get 12 volts coming on your green, going through your motor. You get 12 on the blue, 12 on the yellow, in theory, 12 in the white, right? Now, obviously, our wipers are moving because of the problem, right? But if I have a test light hooked to battery positive, okay, and I touch the green with it plugged in, everything plugged in, and I back probe the green and I touch that, it's not going to light. If I touch the blue and it lights, okay, that tells me that this relay is energized, right? Or I'm sorry, if I'm hooked to battery positive, yeah, the light will go out. Or no, the light will light. The light will not be lit on your green. The light will be lit on your blue if this relay is energized. If I touch my yellow and it's lit, that tells me that what? My intermediate relay is energized. I hope that makes sense. That's one way to do it. If I touch the white with it hooked to B positive, again, key on, wipers are moving, and I see my test light come on, then go off, come on, go off, come on, there again, I know I'm going in this direction, okay? I hope that makes sense. If that's the case, then I'm going input side, okay? Now, how do I know whether or not I have a bad relay? Well, like I said, if you do the test like I showed you, chances of a bad relay are, it's possible, but you're going to find that, guys. You're going to find that by doing the checks I initially talked about, okay? So if you have a stuck closed relay, shouldn't you see that? Shouldn't you be seeing that? Shouldn't you be seeing that with your key in the off position when you're doing your checks with the test light? You should. So I'm thinking input side now. I'm thinking input side. All right. Well, how do we check our input side? We'd have to go to our... We could do it one of several ways. Does it make sense to go to this underhood fuse box, pull it up, and find these pins? Because I'm going to tell you this right now. These relays, you can't access these relays. They're internal. These relays are internal. They're not like a relay you can just pluck out and put a new one in or do flip-flopping. No. They don't exist. They exist, but they're internal to the board, so not happening. I'm not going there. I would be going to my switch, okay? I would be going to my switch, and I would be looking for these switch inputs. Now, here's the problem. Here's the problem you're going to run into. You can't do that. You can't check your intermediate, can you? Can you check your low? Remember what I said. I would assume these are 12-volt feeds, right? So wouldn't this green white at the switch, so say we go to the switch, okay, and we're testing all these wires. We know that we're supposed to have a full-time power feed on this one right here, this white red, hot at all times, right? This is a hot at all times fuse, so that's always going to be hot. That's a simple check. Hook to B negative, test light, boom, it's lit. Start it, boom, it's lit, we're good. It's good power feed. Go to B negative, check it running. Yep, we got a good ground. Okay, that check those two off. This one's an ignition input, so we're going to have a lit test light hooked to battery negative when we have the key on or when it's running, right? Because this is a hot when on or run fuse. It tells us our ignition input's there. Well, what about that guy? What about that light green from the MCU? What's supposed to be there? That B can. That's where you're going to need a scope. That's where you're going to need a scope. Now you could disconnect, and you could disconnect from the actual fuse relay box behind the left kick panel. Okay, and I'm telling you right now, that's a huge waste of time. And you could do an ohms check if you thought you had a bad wire. Okay, or you could scope it and look for that, and do a disconnect and look for it. Okay, you could go that route. Again, this is where a scan tool will shine, because if you had an input problem, say for example, you have a bad MCU, okay, and it's somehow telling it over that B can to, who knows, this is a communication line, you know, these switch inputs are going up to this MCU, because it's on the network, guys. It's on the network. And that MCU also is talking to the control block, okay? So, I guess, you know, that can make it difficult. That can really make it difficult. But you almost need a scan tool. You almost need a scan tool here in order to know what your switch positions. So when you're looking at the inputs, on your scan tool, that's going to be critical, because if you're seeing all the inputs as, you know, as you're moving the switch to what you would intend them to be. So for example, if I turn it to high and you see the switch input change on the scan tool to high, well, that tells you that these guys are all receiving the message from the switch, right? Okay. That's really the only way you could do it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's really nothing else it could be, okay? If these relays are being energized and your switch is in the off position and it's showing on the scan tool as in the off position, how do you really know whether or not it's in the off position? You don't. You don't, other than that scan data. That's the only way you would know. What a guy could do, though, however, I don't know if it would work or not. It might, though. No, it wouldn't. I'm just thinking how he could do this. You're really at the mercy of a scan tool. I'm going to be completely honest with you. You need those switch inputs. You need to be able to see what this MCU. Okay, let me show you something here. Let's go to the computer data line circuit real quick. I hope that made sense. I would go to the motor. Okay, I would go to the motor and do the checks I explained, because that's going to tell you a lot. It's going to tell you whether or not you have a bad motor, or whether or not you have an input problem, possibly a relay problem, okay? But you're going to need a scan tool. You really are, and you need those codes. There should be some kind of codes, you would think. Let's go to this real quick. Let's go to the computer data lines real quick. I want to show you this. Or actually, was it in computer data lines? Excuse me. It was not. It was under body control modules. Okay. Let me show you something. You see this gauge control module? What do you see there? Wiper washer switch, combination switch control unit. Okay. Then this is on the BCM wiring diagram. Okay. I've already mapped these wires out. Or we already know. The white red is our power feed, right? I have it written down here on a sheet. And I would suggest you do that as well. Always map it out so that you know quickly and you don't have to keep flipping back and forth. But the white red it comes from fuse 7. It's a 10 ampere. It's hot at all times. 12 volt feed under that's in the under dash fuse box, relay box, okay? The yellow is a hot ignition feed, okay? Hot ignition feed from the 7.5 amp fuse, fuse 21, same spot. The light green, if you follow this light green up, that's that light green I was telling you about, and it comes over to number 3 there on the previous diagram. And look at number 3 where it comes in. I hope you guys can see this. I'll do my best, but number 3 is right there, that light green. So follow that over, comes in right here, okay, to K27. And it actually shows you the internals of how it's mapped out on here. So let me show you what this is. You see the dotted line around this whole assembly here? And you see how this blue, and look what it says, MCU. And what does that say? Under dash fuse relay box. Okay? Under dash fuse relay box. So that MCU is internal to that relay box, and it's basically kind of like I would imagine, the body control module. So they're just calling it an MCU. Now that light green, let me zoom in here. There we go. That K27 light green, you see how it's all tied together here and how it goes off into multiple different spots? All right. If you look, I followed all these out, but follow this brown yellow up here at, what is that, N20, is it H or N? N28, brown yellow. Follow that down and over. Comes to number 2. Next diagram. Oh, number 2 comes straight into this gauge control module. And what does it say? Communication line. Okay? Now, that gauge control module, from my understanding, oh, where did I see that thing at? And this is just me poking around. Let me zoom back out here. Sorry for the length, guys, but this video is intended to help somebody out, so it's gonna get lengthy. Where was it? Wiring diagrams, system wiring diagrams. Where is it? Instrument cluster, I believe, is where it was. Or was it? I don't know. I could be wrong. Might not be in here. I thought it was, though. Maybe it wasn't in here. Was it in interior lights? Except hybrid. No, it was way down. No. Oh, where was it? I wish I could see it. Yeah, right here. Is this it? Except hybrid. Instrument illumination circuit. Look what it says here. Body controller area network transceiver. Power supply circuit controller area network controller. Gauge control module, dotted line, right? So why they're showing that, you know, I don't know where this thing lives. This gauge control module, I believe I seen it, and then there you go, wiper washer switch. So there's more going to that wiper washer switch. You got your interior lighting, your headlight switch, combination light switch is, you know, going to that wiper washer switch, and that combination switch control unit within it does quite a bit. I'm trying to think where I seen that gauge control unit. I know I seen it drawn inside of something. I want to say it was in the instrument. Yeah, here again. There's a lot of stuff. This gauge control module, I believe, is internal to the IPC, but I could be wrong. It might be inside of that underhood. Well, no, it can't be. MCU. I know I seen it inside of something. Hold on, let me look around. All right. Under warning systems. Yeah, warning systems. Look at it. Look what it says here. Gauge control module. What are we seeing? Lights on indicator. Seat belt reminder indicator. Warning drive circuit. Beeper. You see what I'm seeing? Low oil pressure indicator. That baby lives in the IPC, I'm sure of it. So there you go. I hope that answers your question. 8 Power 0. If you have any questions, drop them down. This video is for you. Do some testing, see what you come up with. You're gonna need a scan tool. It's gonna make your life a lot easier for this. Anyways, I hope that made sense. Sorry for the rambling. I'm a little tired. I'm going to bed. Thanks for watching.